Hey guys, Greg Alexander. Today we're going to do a video on flukes and everything about flukes. I'm going to do a comprehensive, cover the bases on flukes. Well, what's a fluke? This is a fluke, right? Little minnow shaped, soft plastic, a lot of times has a split tail and usually has some type of slot in it there for the hook. And flukes come in like any plastic, every color under the sun. But most of the time, when you're throwing a fluke, you're trying to imitate, bait fish or schools of bait fish, blueback herring a lot of times in blueback herring lakes, or shad in shad lakes. So there's, about 3 colors that are going to work really good for you all the time. White or pearl white. Disco shad, which is kind of a clear white with some green fleck and black fleck in it. And Arkansas shiner works real good. And the third really good color would be blue glimmer shad. So there's a lot of ways to rig a fluke and a lot of different uses you can use a fluke for. A lot of people, most people, the most common way to throw a fluke would be to throw it Texas rig. So you take the fluke and you take a Texas rig offset shank hook and you rig it basically Texas style through the head like you normally would. Go down a little bit and out. Back in, turn it around, slide the hook up in the little gap, measure where it's going to go. Come through the back of the fluke and just let it kind of sit there. You probably don't need to skin hook it with a fluke most of the time unless you're in heavy, brushy type cover. And then what you would do with that fluke is you would throw it out around cover a lot of times, sometimes not around cover, just around sandbars or things, or around schooling fish or around bait pods. And throw it out and work it kind of like a jerk bait across the top of the water. That's the most common way to throw it. Now, this is a smallish hook. This is like a 3/0 hook, which you can use because you have this slot here, right? So that slot's gonna, eat the hook up and allow it to come out. So you don't have to have a great big hook. But sometimes what you want to do if you're not fishing real heavy cover, or you're fishing open water, is you can add a trailer hook to that in 2 forms. You can add a regular straight shank trailer hook, or you can add a treble hook. And some people even tie a piece of braid onto the back of the hook, or the hook eye of the first one, pieces little braid, and then put another hook in it. But the simplest way to rig a trailer hook up on a fluke, a lot of times you do it with a treble hook. And what you want to do is take the hook back out of the fluke and put the treble hook over the hook so that the single part of the hook is towards the fluke. And then you put that back in just like you had it. And then you take that single part of the hook and you skin hook that back in the back of the fluke. Now that's done from the bottom side, right? That's the bottom side. So, when it comes up, they can get that treble hook real easy if it doesn't get the front hook. But you can also do it on the top side to get a little bit more weedlessness, or if these fish are kind of crashing on it, sometimes it's better from the top. And if you do it from the top, you run the hook through the back of the fluke like you do normally. And then you do the same thing you just did. Make sure that the hook point here is towards the, so there's 2 hooks that aren't going to be towards it and one that is towards it. And you can put that on the, just right over top of the hook. Right over top of the hook like that, right? And then skin hook that or put that back in the back of the fluke. Now, if you do it this way, I don't have it with me, it's advisable that you put a little hook keeper, a piece of screen bead, a little piece of tubing or something like that to hold the hook on there. From the bottom, the hook can't come off. From the top, it can get pushed off and pushed forward, and you can lose your fish. So you do need a a little keeper on that hook if you do it that way. So that's two of the most common ways to rig it. Now, if you're wanting to get your fluke a little bit deeper while you're reeling it in, you can use a belly weighted hook, right? And that's just the same basically hook with a weight on it to get it a little bit deeper. And that's just, you know, with this one's a screw lock, so we're just going to screw it into the head. We're just going to screw it into the head of the fluke like you do with any type of screw lock hook. And then, you know, get it going in the right direction. And then you put the hook through the fluke, just like you did before. And then you have a belly weighted hook, and that allows it to get a little bit deeper while you're reeling it in. So, you know, sometimes you just got to experiment with that, because sometimes if you're throwing a weightless fluke, these fish will actually push the fluke out of the water and not get a good, you know, get a good bite on it. Where if you have a weighted hook, they have a harder time pushing it out of the water. It maybe travels a couple more inches below the surface depending on how fast you're reeling it, and they can get a, you know, they can get a better bite on it with a weighted hook. Now, something else you can do with that weighted hook too is you put the weighted hook in the fluke and you just throw it out there and let it sink. And it'll tend to sink like, you know, shimmy down because there's no weight in the head, it's in the center. So you'll get kind of a little shimmy action fall down, almost kind of like a Senko, but with the bait fish look. And sometimes that's a good ploy to catch these fish. And then you can also use, you know, a nail weight in the head, in the center of the fluke, between the hook eye and the shank sometimes, to keep that weight more centered to help get it down. That's ways that you can fish the fluke. Now, here's another way that we fish flukes, is with a bladed hook. So you get a willow blade, and that's just the same thing. That's just got a screw lock in it. You put it through, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. You put it through like that, and you swim that around. And a lot of people will throw this particular type of hook with a swim bait. But, you know, sometimes these fish just want a little bit more subtle action, you know, and they'll want a fluke with the bladed hook instead of a swim bait with the bladed hook, and it can make a big difference in tournaments sometimes. And then, of course, we have the underspin. You know, that's a jig head. This one has a couple blades on it. Instead of just one, it has a couple blades on it, little fish head underspin. And you mount your fluke on there with the hook exposed again. And swim that around and see if that's what they want. You get that in various color heads, various sizes, to match how deep you want to go. If you're fishing deeper, you're going to want to, you know, a bigger head. This is like a 1/4 ounce, so it's not going to get real deep unless you're reeling it really, really slow. Now, one thing I like to do with a fluke is when I'm on like herring lakes or I'm around schooling fish, is I like to throw an open hook like this, It's just a straight shank hook. You can use a pin grip hook or like even like a TK130 flipping hook. It's got the little keeper point on it that holds the hook in there really nice. And this open hook, I mean, he can't hardly miss that. If he is missing that, again, you can add the treble trailer hook again with a little keeper on there. And you probably, you know, I wouldn't probably add the treble hook until I felt like the fish weren't getting it good, because they're usually going to get that single hook pretty good. And again, if you need to add a little weight, you can add a little weight to that also. So another thing that you can use flukes for is trailers on a spinnerbait. When you're trying to imitate, you know, herring, shad, whatever, you know, they're used to seeing, you know, all the split tails, they're used to seeing grubs, they're used to seeing swim bait trailers anymore on spinnerbaits. But that subtle fluke look on a spinnerbait sometimes makes a difference. And then, of course, you would match that to your spinnerbait. If you're a white spinnerbait, you want a white fluke. You know, if you're a chartreuse and white spinnerbait, you probably still will want a white fluke and maybe dip the tail in chartreuse if you got some color to the water. And one of the other things that I like to use a fluke for is on a trailer for a vibrating jig, chatterbait, thunder cricket, whatever. And what that does on a vibrating jig is, you know, you get that tail on the back starts going back and forth like that. You know, a lot of us, you know, people are using the little Z-Man trailers that are kind of like a fluke, and it's pretty much the same thing. This has just got a little bit more weight, you know, than that Z-Man, that Z-Shad that they put on the back of there. It's got a little bit more weight. It's got more salt. It'll allow the bait to get a little bit deeper. With those Z-Man products, you know, they float, so it keeps the bait up higher in the water column than a fluke. So if you're looking to get your bait a little bit deeper with a chatterbait or a vibrating jig, then you want to use a fluke. Now, a fluke can win you tournaments when everybody else is throwing conventional lures, especially around grass, around lily pads, things where you can rig that fluke weedless and get it through there when, you know, other people are having a hard time. You can't reel a spinnerbait through there. You can't reel a buzzbait through there. You can throw a frog, you know, but you're very limited on the type of baits that you can actually work in that very heavy grass, heavy cover, heavy pads, heavy brush. But a weedless fluke is something that you can work in that almost better than just about any other lure out there. So it catches giant fish, it catches schooling fish, it catches, you know, dormant fish even will respond to a fluke. Now, there are some other colors of flukes that I've had a lot of success on over the years in super clear water situations when you're not dealing with, you know, shad as your primary forage, then white's probably not going to be your color. But in those situations, you know, you'll throw like just a watermelon fluke. You know, a straight watermelon fluke has caught me a lot of fish in clear water over the years. You know, or even a green pumpkin fluke with the tail dipped in chartreuse when, you know, the forage is bluegill and a lot of times. And a lot of people kind of just think fluke and herring, fluke and shad, but you know, it catches fish in these rivers. You know, I fish a lot of tidal rivers, and you know, we don't have shad. We'll get, you know, every couple 3 years we'll get a migration of LY up the river, and it, you know, I'm not even really sure the bass really prefer the LY, because it doesn't seem like when they come up the river that the bass start spitting them up in the live well or anything. So it's like they don't even prefer them. I don't know if they're too salty or what they are. But anyhow, so think in terms of what's the forage. Are you pond fishermen? You know, if you're pond fishermen, you know, you're probably dealing with mostly bluegill and crawfish and maybe some what we call bitterhead or little shiner minnows, basically. And then match, you know, the size and the color to that primary forage. You know, you can always get them to bite a white, probably. You can always get them to even bite a pink. You know, pink's a good color in a fluke too. So take these techniques that I've shown you, weighted, unweighted, trailer hooks, straight trailer hooks, treble trailer hooks, open hooks, underspins, both types of underspins, different colors, different sizes. Members of Fluke Junior too, if the bait's really small. And go out on your favorite lake and try these techniques and you will catch more fish. And you know, speed of retrieve is very important too with a fluke. You know, get down. If you're fishing, you know, blueback herring lakes, then you probably can't reel your fluke fast enough because they're so used to these blueback herring swimming at high rates of speed to get away from them just under the surface. So you want to mimic that as much as possible to catch those fish on the blueback herring lakes. And you know, if you're dealing with shad, then you don't have to reel near as fast, because the shad don't move near as fast as the blueback herring do. So keep that in mind, the speed of your retrieve. And you know, if your speed of retrieve is so fast that you can't hardly keep your bait in the water, then you just want to add a little bit of weight to it, you know, to keep it right on the surface or just under the surface. But sometimes skipping across the surface, I mean, just reeling it fast with no weight on it, sometimes that's the only way you can get a bite. So keep those things in mind also. Hey guys, again, I thank you guys for watching. And if you think you want to follow me on a regular basis, please hit the subscribe button, the little like button, and the little alarm bell thing. That'll give you alerts when a new video has come up. Again, I appreciate you watching, and have a blessed day.